listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
How's it going out there? Thanks as ever for checking out the Straight to Video podcast. So on today's show, I am thrilled to bring you a talk with a guy who I feel is one of the most respected and hard-working musicians on the rock and roll circuit. He's played guitar with the likes of the Black Alos, Amen, the Loyalties, Ginger Wildheart, and for many years now has stood on stage alongside Michael Monroe. I'm talking, of course, about guitarist and graphic designer Rich Jones. Rich and I first met back in, I think it was 2006, when my band TCC and Rich's brand new band, The Loyalties, ended up playing a show on a boat sailing around Venice. Since then, it's always a thrill to see what he does next, whether it be rocking a stage or producing some cool album covers or t-shirts for your favourite band. We had a really great chat about moving from the UK to Canada when he was a kid, his early concert memories, moving back to London, and how things have changed, as well as the story behind the infamous Dollars for Deadbeats show at the 12 Bar in London back in 2009. There's a heck of a lot to take from this episode, and I think it could certainly have been a two-parter. As always, this Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. I always use it to create the podcast episode art what you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market. So please, if you can, check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, let's dive into this week's show. If you want to keep up to date with all of Rich's shows with Michael Monroe, then simply head on over to michaelmonroe.com. Rich also has a Bandcamp page where you can listen to some solo material, and his design work can be seen at turningrebellion.com. But right now, please enjoy my Straight to Video chat with Rich Jones. What's going off?
Oh my God, there's like 10 million pop-ups on this thing. As soon as I open it, I can't even see your face. It's like sending me ads. Okay, sorry. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Is it bright and early there? What is it, like 9 o'clock?
9 o'clock. I just stopped and got my coffee and cleared the brain fog, you know?
Not a very rock and roll time.
It's not, but I'm up early. I'm old, you know? I can't help it. Even if I wanted to sleep in, I can't.
Got responsible things to do.
The worst.
How's the new year started for you?
Yeah, it's been pretty good so far. I've had 7 months off, right? Which is nuts for me. Like, I can't remember the last time I was off the road for that long. And it's been nice, but then all of a sudden I'm like looking at everything I've got coming up, and I realized a few weeks ago, I'm like, I need to learn like 70 songs in the next few weeks. So I've kind of like gone into that mode now, you know? I'm like, oh crap, I got to put my head down and like actually remember what it's like to get back to work.
It's sometimes like that. It's like, I hate rehearsing.
Yes, me too. Yes. I'm cheers my coffee to you on that.
Do the homework and then like, let's just have a couple of rehearsals and let's go. Or even throw and go. Be ready or go home, one of my friends says.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how we have to do it with Michael, right? You know, because I live here in Canada. Steve lives in New York. Carl lives in Spain. Sammy kind of splits his time between Finland and Spain, right? So it's literally like, I would say 99% of the time when we go on tour, we have an email thread where it's like, what's the set? And that's it. We show up at the first show and like, we go. But we've been doing it for so long that we kind of know. But the thing is like, I remember we had a rehearsal a few years ago in Helsinki, and I was walking to this rehearsal. I'm like, God, I hate rehearsing. And I'm like, to be fair, we haven't rehearsed in 3 years.
I've done pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. We're going to Japan in February. Those are our next shows, and we're doing completely different sets everywhere, and it's like songs we've never played before. So we're like, okay, maybe we need to actually get a rehearsal in before we do this one.
Super, man. Well, Rich, it's awesome to connect on here, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So as Rich Ragney says, we're apparently full name friends. He always refers to you as Rich Jones.
Oh, really? You know who else is a full name friend? Tom Spencer.
There you go. And I actually spoke to Todd Kearns last night.
Oh, Todd Kearns. He's also a full name guy. I love that dude. I was just talking to him the other day, actually.
He sends his love and he says he's your biggest fan.
Oh, well, he's very charming, if nothing else. And his brother is one of my best friends actually, and he plays in the Black Halos with me.
Unreal bass player, dude. I saw him with Robin Black in like the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Robin had been to the UK a year or so before then, and I was blown away then. Then he came back with this whole new lineup. John was on bass and he like dropped to the floor with that Rickenbacker. I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. I'm like, after all these years, I'm like, how is your back not just this like mangled mess,
Oh man, it blew my mind. He's there with the mohawk and the bass dragging on the floor.
He's still the same dude. Who else was in that band? Was Kai playing in the lineup then?
Kai was still in there, yeah. And he had called him the Kid on drums.
Oh yeah.
Starboy was still there, so they changed the drummer and bass player for that second tour.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was out with John Kearns like a couple weeks ago for my wife's birthday, and we all met at this restaurant, a bunch of friends. And then we left. We're like, we'll find like a bar in the neighborhood, And we walk down the street, and there's this little bar. It's like a barbershop by day, bar by night. And there's a little chalkboard outside, and it says, "Tonight, Kyanto." And we're like, what? And like neither one of us had seen him in like 15 years, It's so funny that he comes up right away in this conversation. So we ended up going in, and Kai came in and he played an acoustic set in this little bar. It was great.
Kai's awesome. He was on the podcast probably about 2 years ago now, and that was the first time I'd seen him in the UK. Every now and again he'd come back over because he had some friends here and he'd just be visiting and stuff like that. But yeah, he's such a cool dude.
I don't think I'd seen him in maybe 20 years, right? And the last time I saw him, I did like a UK tour with my friend Neil Layton and Kai. It was the three of us. We were just playing acoustics, and I don't think we even I'm pretty sure we didn't even figure out a set before we went on the tour. It was like the three of us in a car playing in the corners of pubs and stuff like that. It was a fun time.
That whole thing which happened in the early 2000s with a lot of Canadian people started coming over, Neil Layton, who you mentioned just then, and Robin Black and Sean Kelly and all those things. That had such a massive effect on me, because that's when I was trying to do something in music back then. And such a cool time. Really, really was.
Oh, yeah, it really was. Yeah. And it's so funny because it was a really kind of a little scene of people here in Ontario, that came over. And it was just one of those things where people come over and be like, yep, know them. I know them. It was all kind of people from the neighborhood,
Exactly. So you're back in Ontario now. Is it Hamilton?
Yeah, I'm in Hamilton. Yeah.
Which is, I looked on the map, that's kind of just south of Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. We're about 45 minutes out of the city.
And not far from where you grew up after moving from the UK.
Exactly. Look at you, man. What happened was I was basically in the process of moving from London to Berlin when I met my wife. She ended up coming to move to Berlin with me. And then eventually, she did her degree there because, it's like free university for everybody in Germany, right? She did her degree there, but when she was done, it was like, well, we kind of need to go somewhere that's English speaking and that, is a good place to have a family and a good place to live. And England was actually out of the question, weirdly enough. It's so restrictive for if you want to bring your spouse to the UK, it was basically impossible for me. Legally, I couldn't do it. And so we're like, well, Brexit had just happened as well. And, Trump had just been elected. She's from California, we're like, well, we're not going to the US. So it was kind of just this was the obvious choice.
I know somewhere where we can go.
yeah, exactly. I grew up here. I'm like, this is a great place to live. And to be honest with you, I don't regret it at all. It's great. I'm super happy being back here.
Is she into rock music and stuff?
Yeah, she is. But, she's, has a regular day job.
Yeah, she's smart. She's got her head screwed on.
Oh, yeah. She's definitely the brains of the operation over here.
Do you go past your old house at all if you're living right near where you used to?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's the next city over, so I kind of have to go over there. But yeah, it's nice being here for sure.
We've kind of just dived straight in, Rich. How are you for time?
I'm good. I cleared my schedule, which was basically learn 70 songs.
Is it really 70 songs? Not that many, surely.
Something like that. We're going to Japan. We're doing 2 shows in Tokyo. And the first night we're doing Hannah Rock's album, 2 Steps from the Move, plus a regular set of songs. Second night we're doing Not Faking It, plus a regular set of songs. And then we have 2 other shows, which are going to be different sets, right? But then when we're done there, we fly straight from Japan to Helsinki, where we start making a record.
Dude.
We've got 20 something songs for that, and I'm kind of writing a bunch more still right now. So there's, between that, the 2 records, the sets, you're into about 50 songs, right?
You're getting up there, yeah.
But then we finished, 2 days after we finished the record, me and Michael are going on an acoustic tour of Sweden, which is going to be a completely different set of stuff. So there's another probably 15 or 20 songs to learn right there. So, I got to clear some space up in the old brain box. You know what I'm saying?
Are you much of a jam rat? Because I've played in loads of bands, and I think I'm pretty good at if someone says, oh, we've got a gig in 2 to 3 weeks, I can learn the set and be pretty much ready. But once once it's in there, it's fine. But if I don't do it for a couple of weeks, it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good for me. I usually like to have a little refresh, and then I'll realize, like, especially with stuff we played like 3,000 times, I'll realize like halfway through the song that I'm not even thinking, I'm like looking out the window or whatever, I'm like, oh, okay, I got this. It's weird how some stuff really stays in there, even songs we hadn't played in like probably 7 or 8 years or something. I kind of play through it once. I'm like, oh yeah, it's there, I'm not like a guy like Todd Kearns, who we were just talking about, who you can call out like any song in the world that's ever been played on rock radio. And he's like, oh yeah, dude, I know that. And he just like,
yeah, we got it. Hate that. Hate those people.
That bastard. He's handsome too. I hate it.
I know.
And he can sing.
How much has the area changed since growing up? Has it changed much?
Well, not that much. The place where I live now in Hamilton, it was, when I was growing up, it was the rough, the steel town, the working class city. But I used to come down here a lot, record shopping and go see bands play and stuff like that. I mean, I kind of like a city like that, to be honest. But it's always had kind of a bad reputation, this town. And when we moved back here, I'm like, if we're going to look for a house, it's a good city that people haven't really caught on to, And we were kind of lucky because when we bought our house like 6 years ago or something, it was right around then that people kind of started to clue in like, hey, this is actually a great place to live, So now we live in, like a nice neighborhood in a cool city, It's great.
That seems to be kind of worldwide, or in a lot of places, like all these places just transforming.
Yeah, I mean, I've always noticed, especially you go to these places, if there's a big city and there's kind of a, the more rundown area, it's always where all the musicians and artists go, right? Because that's all we can afford. And then because of that, those areas become cool. And then because of that, those areas become gentrified. And then everybody has to move somewhere else, It's like you see it so many times. And that's kind of what we did here. I mean, we moved to the east end of town and it was, as the realtors like to say, up and coming when we moved here. And now it's like, it's great. There's like record shops around here. There's live music venue down the street. It's become a really cool place.
I love that. I mentioned earlier, though, you was born in the UK and lived in Coventry till you were 8 years old. That's all during like the mid to late 70s. What do you remember most about that time? Was you a Star Wars kid back then?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I moved in 81. I was pretty young still when I moved. So I don't have a lot of necessarily like pop culture memories of then, although my first real kind of exposure to hearing songs that I loved was when I was that age. I still really remember hearing Brass in Pocket on the radio and just being like, what is this? And when I was probably 7, I was a huge Adam and the Ants fan.
I think we all were, no matter how young you was.
Yeah, and when you look at it, there was a lot of great music on the radio back then, for sure, of all different genres. And then it was very different when I moved here, for sure. I would say the pop culture side of things was much more like TV and movies, and you kind of hear the stuff on the radio, and it was kind of crappy here. So when I first moved here, the first year that I lived here, it was, Halloween came around. Back then in UK, there was no Halloween, right? So I'm like, get to go out, you get candy door to door. This is amazing, right? And so early 80s, small town Ontario. And I dress up for Halloween as Adam Ant.
Yes.
And nobody in Canada knows who I am, right? He's not famous here. So I'm like this little kid going door to door. And people are like, what are you, a pirate? And I'm like, no, I'm Adam Ant. What's wrong with you?
Amazing. Oh, there's no photographs from back then, is there?
I wish there was a photo of that. I think my mom even made me the little jacket, the one that he had.
Oh, dude, that is so cool. So when would that be then? Because my dad lives in Mississippi, and the first time I went to visit him was Halloween, and it would have been in, it's going to be 81 or 82, so it's probably around the same time.
Yeah, it was exactly. It was one of those years, yeah.
I was Boba Fett, and you was Adamant.
Yeah, exactly. At least people would have known who you were.
Oh, incredible. What actually led to you moving to Canada?
My dad just moved here for work. We had some, family friends who lived here, and that was it, really, I feel pretty fortunate that we did, because I think my life probably would have taken a really different trajectory if I'd grown up in Coventry. I don't know if I'd be playing music or if I would have had the opportunities I had,
Yeah. Was it scary? Or, how much of Canada was on your radio? Obviously, as UK kids, you couldn't escape the influence of America, but did you know much about Canada? Or did you think it was kind of the same place?
No, I mean, especially when, we're planning on moving here, I was 7 years old. I didn't really know anything, I think my parents taught me the names of the Great Lakes, that's about it. When you're a kid, generally speaking, you're a little more kind of, like open-minded to just like, yeah, let's go. Yeah. Okay. Let's do this. Let's see what it's like. You don't really think about the kind of what a big deal it is. Right.
Yeah. Probably if it had been, I don't know, 5-6 years later when you was like 12, 13, you'd have been perhaps crushed, like leaving your friends and terrified or something like that.
exactly. Yeah, because by that you're starting to develop more of your kind of independence, right? Your own life.
Absolutely, yeah. Was you always into like art and stuff at school? 'Cause obviously you've had like this joint career of music and artwork.
I was lucky. Like we had a great art program at my school. We also had a great music program. We even had like for one of my courses for a couple of years in high school, I took guitar. That was a class, so I get credit for playing guitar.
Well, that's like what you were saying. If you'd have stayed in Coventry, like music has never been a big thing at schools over here. We did music for like a year or so, then it got cancelled, and there was never anything to do with like, it was all piano and all that kind of thing. So that's a great opportunity for you.
Yeah, I mean they had they had a kind of a more traditional music class in my high school too, and it was very much like focused towards the high school band, which I wasn't in, and because of that I kind of had a hard time with it from the teacher too, because the things I wanted to play weren't considered legitimate, which is ridiculous, but that's how it was. But I was lucky that we also had this guitar class, and we had this guitar teacher who I swear to God, I mean looking back now, I'm like, he was just lazy, really. He would be like, you'd all come in, he'd take attendance, he'd go, okay, everybody, independent practice, and he'd just send you out into the hallway, and everybody goes play guitar, sit in the stairwell, whatever, eating cheeseburgers. Like that's all it was, right? And I'm like, great.
Independent practice. You think he made that up?
Oh, absolutely, right? he was probably laughing his ass off. Like, I just signed him in and I sent him off for independent practice, and he, kicks back and watches videos or whatever. But I had a friend, and me and him would just sit down and we'd learn like every song we could, we'd just sit there playing guitar for an hour, and I'm like, I'm getting credit for this. It's awesome.
So how old was you at that point?
I mean, I'm guessing 14, 15. Like I said, that whole time's a blur to me. I'm just like, get me out of here.
Because when you came to Canada, did you see Queen pretty early on, like when you was like 10 or something like that?
Yeah, how do you know all this, man? That was actually the first show I ever went to when we first moved here. My parents took me and my sister to see Queen play at Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. I think it was 82.
Was that because you wanted to go or your mum wanted to go?
My parents were fans, but obviously, I heard the records a lot in the house as a kid, so I knew all this stuff. I was excited to go too. And it was one of those moments where you're just like, for a show and it's Queen? Like, come on, I was just like, what is this, I mean, that was me like, that's what I'm doing.
Really? It was a proper light bulb thing even at that young age, like, I want to give this a shot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm like, this is the job? Why do people want to do those other jobs? Look at this one.
Whereabouts were you sat in the arena? Was you pretty close, or was you like up in the nosebleeds?
We were up in the stands, but it was close enough. I mean, it was one of those big shows, screens and everything. It was the ridiculous over-the-top Queen show. And I'm pretty sure if it wasn't their last time over here, it was one of the last times. Because, and I don't know if how well known this is, but when they put out the video for I Want to Break Free, it killed them in North America because of the homophobia, because they were dressed in drag.
Unreal.
And I don't think they really came back and toured much after that. At least not, the original band.
That's nuts to think that had such an effect.
Yeah, I mean, different times, right? Jeez.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, I mean, the more time goes by, the more it's kind of jaw-dropping. It's like, you guys were like denying yourselves a chance to see that band because some people are upset about them dressing in drag? Like,
oh my God. So here's a question. Do you know who opened up for them?
I do. Billy Squier.
Technically the first live band you saw then.
Yeah, I've said this before because, Steve Conte, who plays in Michael's band, he actually played with Billy Squier for, I think he did a tour with him or something. And I'm like, technically the first show I ever saw. And I think Billy had a bit of a rough one that night. I think he kind of threw a bit of a wobbler because he wasn't going down as well as he expected,
Some of those first bands I saw live, like the support band was like still a big deal. Like I was checking them out like a legit thing. Iron Maiden was my first concert, but Wolfsbane supported them.
Oh, wow. What year would that have been?
I was pretty late to it, so that was September 1990.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so Iron Maiden were doing like the first 10 years tour where they went back and did like all the old venues which they used to play. So they played like the Assembly Rooms in Derby, which held 2,000 people maybe, if that.
That's amazing. I saw Iron Maiden. I used to go see them a lot in the 80s because, especially when you're a kid, it's like every show is just like, man, the biggest, the most like over the top, like insane shows. I would go to all those arena shows. I loved it. And I saw Iron Maiden in Toronto, and the support band was Guns N' Roses.
Nice.
I think they only did like 5 or 6 dates with Iron Maiden, and then they dropped off the tour.
Was that the Somewhere in Time tour?
Seventh Son. It had the big like inflatable stage set. And I remember just being like, oh, that's kind of lame. It's just like big balloons, because you're used to like these crazy like pyramids and like Eddie's breathing fire and all this stuff. And I'm like, What is this?
Who else came through town who like blew your mind? Did you ever like do Bon Jovi or Def Leppard or anything like that?
One of the early ones I saw that was like blew me away was Alice Cooper, The Nightmare Returns tour, 86 maybe.
Wow.
And he played here in Hamilton, actually, is where I saw the show. And my mom is great. You know, it was back in the day, you'd have to go line up for tickets. So she went and like lined up at the record store and got me tickets while I was at school.
Brilliant.
And I ended up with these amazing, I was like 10th row or something on the floor, you know. Again, like one of the first shows I went to on my own, and it's Alice Cooper, you know. And it was one of like, you know, just like Kane Roberts with like the flame-throwing guitar, you know. I think Kip Winger was playing bass.
Dude.
And then I don't know who else was in the band back then, you know. I mean, it was a long time ago, right? But yeah, I mean, that one really kind of stuck with me. I ended up seeing Alice a lot over the years.
Have you ever toured with Alice?
Yeah, we toured with him last summer. We played with him a couple times, and he's always, you know, really like such a nice person, right? And I remember me and Michael went to see him in Helsinki. He was playing this festival there called Tuska, and he invited us back. And I'm just like, all right, you know. And so we ended up hanging out, just talking to him for a little while. And he's so nice. And he's like, you know, we got to play some shows together, you know. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course, you know, everybody says that, you know. And then a couple weeks later, there's the offer, you know. And I'm like, come on, like one of the guys that like just follows through, like he's not just blowing smoke, you know. And so we did a couple shows with him 5-6 years ago, I guess. And then last summer we did a bunch. Was it last summer or the summer before? Everything's like a time warp for me since COVID happened. Summer before last, we went through Europe with him. We did a lot of shows, pretty big like arena shows with him throughout Europe. And it was amazing, you know, and they treated us so well.
You didn't try and get in on like, you know, your next album, if you need some artwork doing, drop us a line.
Yeah. I think that's all pretty locked down. But, you know, those guys like Alice would bring Michael up to sing. They had treated us so well, like in every aspect of that tour. And on Michael's birthday, we were playing in Germany, and they got a huge cake. And then they brought us all out on stage at the end of School's Out, and they brought a cake to Michael, and he got the whole crowd to sing happy birthday to him. Like, just what a great dude.
That's also like not only a great showman, great musician, great songs, but a good dude. That's a key to longevity as well. Absolutely.
I mean, you know, it doesn't hurt that his catalog is insane, and his live show is just like amazing. You know, it doesn't hurt.
No. Mentioning artwork, then, has album artwork always been a big deal for you to make it a career as well?
Well, I kind of fell into that side of it, to be honest. I mean, I used to love it when I was a kid. I mean, that was one of my favorite things, was like getting the records and like studying the sleeves and reading all the liner notes and everything, you know. I kind of fell into it just kind of gradually. Like when we did the first Black Halos records, there's a designer at Sub Pop named Jeff Kleinsmith who's just incredible. And he was really great about being open to us, you know, like, hey, can we make it look like this? Can we do this? He wasn't precious as a designer. He brought in great stuff. And I kind of gradually got a little more involved from there. And then I just really like fell into it over the following years.
Is that from being like in punk underground bands, DIY, like, we got to figure it out ourselves?
Yeah, exactly. I was doing a lot of poster designs and T-shirts and stuff, and it just kind of naturally, you know, spills over into that, right?
Yeah.
But when I first started doing it, I'm like, I didn't know anything about any of the technical stuff. Like, oh, you know, you got to put 3 millimeters of bleed on this, and there's got to be this much safety. And I'm like, what? I don't know what that is, you know? And I probably drove a lot of people nuts. But, you know, I had enough determination that I just wanted to keep at it. And now it's a pretty good sideline for me.
What was like one of your first bands? Was it the Diesel Dogs?
Well, that was my high school band, yeah. You know, I was 15. We did covers and we played we played a couple bar shows actually when I was 15. But it was all just covers, you know.
That band name holds up pretty well.
It's a Cheech and Chong thing. I think that was the name of their band on one of those records from the 70s. My friend had it at his house and we'd listen to it, you know. He's like, yeah, man, the Diesel Dogs. Like, we just stole the name.
Was there anyone like in the local area who you really looked up to? It was like, obviously you'd seen Queen and you're like, oh, this could be a job. This could be something I want to do. But was there anyone in any like local bands where you thought, oh, this guy is cool?
In the 80s, especially in Canada, the music scene was pretty terrible. And in a way, it was almost this inspiration. Like when we started doing Black Halos and stuff, I'm like, I don't want to be like any of these fucking bands. Because there's this weird circuit here of bands that just tour in Canada and they have no success anywhere else. You know, they don't do anything else. We have this thing called CanCon here, which is like a Canadian content law that says like radio has to play something. I think it's like 33% Canadian music.
I've heard something about that before, yeah.
So there are certain bands that have just built careers off that, and they just go coast to coast for decades, which to me sounds like an absolute living hell. But I also think it's great on one hand that it's nurturing talent here, right? But I also think that it kind of boosts mediocrity a little bit. There's a bunch of stuff that maybe wouldn't get a chance at all if it wasn't for these laws, you know?
Right, yeah.
So anyways, what I was getting at is that there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of this just like real kind of safe, you know, like, hey, the government gave this a grant kind of music, you know what I mean? A lot of that. And so in a way, that was like the inspiration. We're like, let's be the opposite of that.
With the Black Halos, is that when things really began to feel like you're onto a path of, I was going to say having a career, but in that kind of scene, does it ever feel like you're having a career when you're going from gig to gig, barely making it pay? Then all of a sudden it's like 15 years later and it's like, shit, I guess I'm in this for the long haul.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was like. It's like one day I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I've been touring for 20 years or whatever, you know? I mean, when you're young, right? It's like, do you want to get in a van and drive all over US and Canada, you know, and you're only getting $5 a day, but you can see the world, play some shows, get drunk for free every night? I'm just like, yes, I do. What do I got to come home to? My crappy job at the record store? Who cares?
Well, that sounds pretty cool. A job at a record store. That sounds pretty cool.
Oh, I mean, it was great. And I actually had a good job at a record shop here that they basically let us have the time off to go on tour. We had a really supportive owner.
Mate, that is gold, really. That's worth a pay rise in itself if you want to do music as well.
Yeah. It was this chain of stores called Sam the Record Man here, and it was owned by a guy named Sam, and they had like 90 stores across the country. But they were great. They would like really support independent bands. They would sometimes even put money into bands like putting out their own records and stuff. The owner eventually passed along to his son. He's a musician, you know, he's a rock guy. He still puts out records now, you know, and his son is actually one of the guys that plays in Ghost.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyways, I totally got off on a tangent there. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, for me, like going back to the touring thing, we toured so much in the Black Halos because what else would we do? Like, why would we say no to a tour? Like, this is what we're doing. You know, we put out a record. Why wouldn't we go on tour? You know, and everybody had the same mindset, which was awesome. But I remember being out on the road somewhere like in the US. We've been out for like over a month, you know, maybe more. And then we got a call saying, hey, do you guys want to do a US tour with L7 for like another month? We're like, when does it start? They're like, right at the end of this one. We're just like, yeah, let's do it. I remember I left my house in June in a van and I came home in November.
How long had you planned to be out?
I don't know. I mean, probably a couple months, you know, do the summer tour or whatever. But we just went hard with that band.
That's cool, though, they had that traction. Or did it feel like things were like really moving along? Like, oh, cool, got this other opportunity.
Honestly, it always felt like an uphill battle.
Right.
But it was, for me, it was like, that's how you do it.
When was it you did Warped Tour with the Black Halos? Was that during that extended run?
Yeah, we did it a couple times. I want to say we did it in 2000 for the first time. It was a weird lineup. I mean, it was cool, but it was like Eminem was on it, and he was like, you know, up and coming at that point. People hated him. They sold these like big lemonades, and they had like a half a lemon in them, and people were buying the lemonade so they could throw the lemons at Eminem. So he was on it, and I think Ice-T was on it, and for some reason, I want to say the Black Eyed Peas might have been on it that year. It was a weird-ass lineup. That year, we just did the one in Vancouver, and then the next year, we toured it around a little bit, and that was a great year. It was like the Distillers, Rancid, AFI, just a bunch of bands that I actually wanted to see. The Ataris were on it. It ended up really good. Like, we got offered a lot of tours out of it from bands that we'd met, played with, hung out with and stuff. But we broke up right after that, so... You know, that's how it goes.
It must have been such a good hang, though, at the Warped Tour. Or was it just exhausting because it's like everyone says how hot it is?
For a band like us, on our level, it was exhausting, right? Because you have to get there at 9 a.m. because they put the schedule out on the day, right? They change the schedule every day. So it could be Rancid playing first. You never know. So you have to get there at 9 a.m. to find your schedule out. And then you have to stay till the end because you're basically like locked in the compound, which is 11 or something, right? So we would do that, you know, we're in a van, and then the drives could be like 11 hours. So if you do the math, it's like there's no time to sleep ever. It's like basically just like get out of there at 11 a.m., hit the road, drive all night, and get there at 9 a.m. to find out your time. And then you're there all day again, you know? So if you're on a bus, piece of cake. But if you're 5 dudes in a van with one guy helping you, which is what we were, it was rough.
You did some stuff with Amen, which would lead you to relocating to the UK. I mean, that's a great story about the band literally having a fight at the album launch signing in London. Something these days, that would probably be a constructed PR stunt, but that was the real deal.
Oh, yeah, it definitely wasn't that. I remember, though, we got, you know, so we did it was like the album release, you know, we played a show and everything. And then at the signing, me and Casey got into a fist fight.
Was there a huge queue of kids as well?
Oh, yeah, I was in front of everybody. I mean, he was just acting like an asshole, and I just hit the limit, you know?
Imagine if everyone had cell phones.
Yeah, right? Like just before that, really. But I remember we got a review We got like a 2-page review in Metal Hammer of like the show and the fight. And it was like 9 out of 10. I'm like, well, at least something good came out of it.
What do you remember about London at that time in the early 2000s? Where was someone like your regular hangouts? Obviously the 12 bar.
Yeah, that whole little area was great, right? Because you had the Astoria was there, Metro was there, Borderline. I can't believe all those places are gone, I mean, that's crazy. I saw so many great shows. I mean, think about it, really. That's just like two little corners right there. And there's so many great shows. Obviously the Crowbar was there too, I saw so many great shows there. I mean, it was a really great time to move to London, even if I was sleeping on couches and literally scraping by.
The Borderline surprised me when that closed because they recently had it all like refurbished.
Yeah, didn't it get bought by like one of the bigger agencies or something, right? And I think, I don't know. It's a shame how that whole little section went there with the Crowbar as well,
Are all like the guitar shops still there on Denmark Street?
So last time I was over there was about a year and a half ago. My friend had a film premiere in Leicester Square. And so I went to that with my wife, and then we decided to walk back through Soho. I'm like, let's go through and, just kind of see the old neighborhood. And it was unrecognizable to me. I'm like, it's like they've just expanded Leicester Square outwards. It was awful, just like stripped of all the character.
Just add in loads of like pret-a-mangers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was like Disneyland for dickheads, you know what I mean? It was like awful down there. And it was honestly like really depressing. And so I'm like, the sooner we're out of here, the better, because I want to kind of remember it the way it was when I worked down there, lived down there. It's not what it was at all.
Is there anywhere in the world which you think still holds that kind of character? Any places in New York which you visit where you get excited about going to?
New York is always going to have character, right? I mean, even if you go down the Bowery now, it's not like it was, when CB's was there or whatever, right? Toronto is actually great for that. People kind of complain about like, oh, there's a lot of gentrification in Toronto. I'm like, yeah, there is, but not really. They're building a bunch of towers and condos, but the neighborhoods have all retained their character from when I was a kid even. And it's cool, it's one of those cities that still has like a lot of like independent shops and restaurants and venues. And just like you go down like Queen Street, which was kind of the main drag when I was a teenager, and it's still like it was really, That's one thing I really like about it. It's really nice to see, But I feel like that character is definitely dying out in a lot of places, London for sure. Even Berlin, just in the few years that I was living there, it changed so much.
It makes me wonder why they do that in a way. It's almost like they want to make everywhere the same and a carbon copy of the familiarity of the places so people know what they're going to get when they get there. So that's almost what attracts people to it. It's like us English people going to America and going to like the English pub because we know what we're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just a case of like, let's throw a bunch of money in here and we already know what works and we can all make a bunch of money out of it and screw everybody that lived there before.
Yeah. We mentioned the 12 Bar in London. My first introduction to that place was... did a gig with Anti-Product one New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
You organised the Dollars for Deadbeats gig for our late friend Roger Siegel there in 2009.
Yeah.
Can you let people know the story behind that, as it turned into quite a star-studded night?
Yeah, it was bizarre. It was, so Roger was playing with Sony and the Sinatras, and Scott and I were obviously friends from the Amen days and stuff. We were pretty tight, and they were coming over for this UK tour. I'm like, man, it's going to be awesome to see you, And Roger was over, and he was in like France or something, right? He was like traveling around. He's like, I'm going to meet you guys in the UK, So I get a message from Scott, and he's like, dude, we got to Heathrow and we got turned back. I'm sure those guys didn't have their paperwork in order or something, or just didn't have any paperwork,
Legend.
And so I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? He's like, well, the whole tour's off. And I was like, oh, Jesus. And then that night I ran into Roger, in the 12 bar. So we're hanging out, we're having a drink. And he's like, I don't know what to do, man. He's like, I'm stuck here for like a few weeks. I have my plane ticket home for after the tour. And he's like, I got no money.
Yeah, cost him a fortune to change the flight or something like that.
Yeah, he's like, I got no money really. I was crashing on friends' couches. And I'm like, why don't we just do a gig here? I'm like, I know the guys. I'm like, we'll hook something up and we'll just play some covers or whatever. It'll be fun. I'm like, I can get some people together. We'll do it, And he's like, yeah, okay. I'm like, we'll just come up with a name for the band. And then right away, he was just like, yeah, Dollars for Deadbeats, and and so I'm like, okay, cool. I just like had an idea of like, okay, we'll just get a few friends. That's all it was. And then slowly but surely, it was like trying to think about who reached out first. Might have been AC Slade, or it might have been Jorma from the Bronx, maybe, or somebody was like, hey, I'm in town, And it was like, oh, do you want to get up and play a song kind of thing? And people would be like, yeah, why not? Like, that'll be fun. I'm like, it's just like a cover thing. So Jorma signed on, and then AC Slade signed on. I don't know if Tom Spencer was involved initially or what, but it was like, he came in, Rich Rags came in, Eureka Machines wanted to play. So I kept like, I had this poster and it was like, members of blah, blah, and then I had to keep adding names to it, right? And then I think Chris McCormick was like, oh, I'll play a song. And then he goes, oh, I can get Spider Stacy from the Pogues. I'm like, all right. So then it was that. And then, I kept updating this poster and I put the poster up and then Ginger wrote me, he goes, oh, I wish I could come down for that gig. I'm like, why don't you come down? And he goes, oh, I probably could. I'm like, okay, I added Ginger to the poster, and it just turned into this huge thing. And the thing was, when we booked it, we're like, it's $3 to get in. And so I'm like, I can't change it now.
Oh, no.
What kind of a move would it be to be like, yeah, no, it's 20,
Yeah.
So we just made it $3 to get into this thing. And it was lined up like all the way down Denmark Street up to like Charing Cross Road around the corner. Like it was insane. And and so it was this awesome thing. It actually, I was like, we need to figure out how to make this work with everybody. So I kind of put the set together and I was sending everybody like these songs and we were like coming on, coming off, And that actually became the template for Ginger's birthday show.
Right, really?
Because after we did that show, Ginger's like, God, we got to do this again. He's like, we should do it for my birthday. And that's how those shows came to be. It was because of Dollars for Deadbeats, right? We kind of proved this formula works, with people coming on and off. So I think we must have done the first birthday show, like, if not that year, then the year after. That's actually what led to me playing in Ginger's band, too, because me and him did that little set together. And he was like, oh, you could actually play guitar. And I'm like, thanks.
Oh, sweet, man.
But it was funny, too, because my friend Darren Sadler, I don't know if you remember, he used to be the editor of Rock Sound, and he wrote for Kerrang and a bunch of stuff. Really good dude. And he had somebody come down to film it. And I'm like, this is great. We'll have a document of the evening. And the people that he got to come down to film it, there was like a band that was on before Eureka Machines, I think. And they basically filmed them and then they went home.
No.
Yeah, like completely misunderstood the assignment. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So, I'm like, dude, how did the footage come out? He's like, well.
Oh, my God. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That would have been a great one to capture on film.
Yeah, there's not like a lot of evidence of that gig, because I don't think there was a lot of like cell phone photos back then either.
Well, there's not a lot of room to get anybody else in.
No, exactly. I mean, it was packed to the walls in there. But yeah, for like kind of like a gig that so many people know about and talked about, there isn't a lot of evidence of it.
Rich, I won't keep you for much longer. I could talk for ages. Last question. I always end each conversation with this. I want you to time travel to a Friday night in the late 80s or early 90s, and you head into the video store. What movie soundtrack do you have on your Walkman as you head there, and what 3 movies are you going to rent for the weekend?
Well, because you did kind of give me a heads up about this, so I had a little chance to think about it, because it's a tough question, right?
Got to pick wisely.
Well, especially for a guy like me. I mean, I grew up, I had a Fangoria subscription when I was, a teenager,
Right. Podcast part 2 at some point.
So, that stuff is like deeply embedded in here. So for the movies, okay, the 80s, got to be something by Frank Henenlotter, because that dude, he only made like 3 movies in the 80s, but they're all like this insane time capsule of like, here's scummy Times Square in the 80s. It's awesome, right? He made Fucking Hooker, he made Brain Damage, and he made Basket Case. I guess he made the Basket Case sequels,
Basket Case is so good for that New York.
I think Basket Case has got to be one of them, right? It's like such a like insane movie, not just for that time period. I mean, you watch it now, you're like, this is an insane movie. All 3 of those are contenders for sure, but I'll go with Basket Case. It's a good one. Return of the Living Dead is kind of obvious, that to me is like the ultimate punk horror comedy. That movie's got everything, right? It's like ridiculous, like amazing special effects, and like the soundtrack, it's like The Cramps, The Damned, TSOL, 45 Grave. It's just a great movie.
We screened it in Nottingham at Halloween. It's the first time I'd seen it on a cinema screen.
Oh, I'd love to.
Oh, mate, it's just so good. It gets funnier older the film gets. The comedy timing in that film is brilliant.
Yeah, it really does. Like, it holds up. I watched it like maybe 6-8 months ago or something with a friend who'd never seen it before. And I just laughed my ass off the whole time. I'm like, this movie is so great. Like, it's every time.
It's almost so funny because it's played straight as well. That's almost what makes it funny.
Yeah. And some like legit actors in it too, which I think really makes it work better. I think if it was like some wooden performances and stuff, it wouldn't be as good, but everything about it, it's like an absolute classic. 10 out of 10. And then my other one, speaking of seeing movies on the big screen, on Sunday night, my local cinema had a screening of the 4K restoration of Cemetery Man, which is like early 90s. I'm cheating a little bit. It's another all-timer. It's Rupert Everett. I think it might be his first movie. And he's this dude who is like the caretaker of this graveyard. and the dead people keep coming back to life and he has to kill them again.
I'm adding it to the list.
It's an Italian movie, and it's like Return of the Living Dead. It's really competent, you know. It's really well made for like what an absolute like gonzo premise it is, and it's beautiful too. It's one of the most beautifully shot movies, you know, of the whole genre, I think. So if you haven't seen it, the Italian title is Della Morte dell'Amore, but if you look up Cemetery Man, you'll find it. I hadn't seen it in a few years, and then seeing it on the big screen, I took in this whole real like new appreciation for it. You know, kind of pushed it right into the top 5.
And what are you gonna have on the Walkman?
This one's tough. You know, Return of the Living Dead's a good one, but I'm like, I can't pick that and pick that as the movie. You know what I have a real soft spot for, though, is like the John Hughes soundtracks of the 80s. I just got the John Hughes box set, that Life Moves Pretty Fast one.
Wow.
6 LPs. And it's so great because it really like runs from everything from like cheesy synth pop to like Killing Joke. But everything is cool on it, you know? There's a guy who really like managed to make music part of the movie.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't be the same without some of the songs that are like key moments. I mean, everybody thinks about The Breakfast Club as the obvious one, you know, but there's so many great songs that came out of those.
Dream Academy. I know that's the synth stuff, but I love all that.
Yeah, but not my favorite movie, but Pretty in Pink has Bring on the Dancing Horses by Echo and the Bunnymen, which I didn't know they wrote for that movie. What a song. That's amazing. And the Psychedelic Furs song, you know, Pretty in Pink, which is what the movie was named after, right? So that's probably the one I'd go for, maybe.
Good choice.
But then here's the other weird little outsider one is the soundtrack to Akira, which is like just insane symphonic chanting. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like this super powerful, like just tons of voices. And I've never really heard anything else like it. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but it's like these just crazy voices going don, don, don all the time. And it's like you listen to it, it's like, man, like hair standing up on your arms, you know?
Have you got to be in the right headspace to listen to that, or can you listen to it anytime?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's you know, almost weirdly terrifying, you know? So, you know, it's a toss-up with those two. I'm probably going to lean into the John Hughes, though, because, you know, everybody loves a good hooky pop song, right?
I love it. Rich, thank you for chatting with me, mate.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
I wish you all the very best. What are you doing? You're doing Japan, Finland, and Sweden?
Sweden, yeah. Finland in the spring. I think we're over in the UK later in the year. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that or not, but, you know, there you go.
Well, it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, well, we have a new record coming out, so probably like end of the year. So we'll be over touring for that.
It's been a long time since that boat trip in Venice.
I was just thinking about that this morning. I'm like, my God, I'm like, there's a whole story with that too, which, you know, we've gotten into. Basically, how we invented the Loyalties just so we could play that show. It wasn't even a band.
That's the first time I met Dunk as well.
Oh, Lord, okay.
All right, you enjoy the rest of your day, mate.
Thanks, you too.
Big thank you to Rich Jones for joining me on today's Straight to Video podcast. Absolutely love listening to those stories and hope you did too. Make sure to see if you can catch Rich on tour with Michael Monroe, and all dates can be found at michaelmonroe.com. And if you want to connect with Rich, he's always active on Twitter and Instagram, simply at Rich Loyalty. So speaking of John Hughes movie soundtracks, which Rich mentioned in our chat, there's a brand new straight-to-video cover song out now, which is my version of I Go Crazy by Flesh for Lulu from the Some Kind of Wonderful soundtrack. It's available to stream on all platforms, and there's a fun video up on the straight-to-video YouTube as well. Hope you like it if you get a chance to listen, and joining me on this track is my friend James Brighouse on vocals and guitar. James is the mastermind behind Night Fires, the band who provide all the interview intro music you hear on each episode. Also on the track is Maren Alford on drums. Some of you will know Maren from Not Your Girlfriends, who joined Bowling for Soup on tour a few years ago. And completing the lineup is Will Crudson, who plays with Adamant. And what's especially cool is that he was in the very final lineup of Flesh for Lulu, so it's extra special to have him playing the guitar solo. As always though, my buddy Nat Webb is in the production seat and dropping some cool keyboards on the tune, so hope you like it. Maybe check out the original version and perhaps revisit Some Kind of Wonderful, as I think it's one of the more overlooked films in John Hughes' body of work. I'm going to be away for a couple of weeks, but hopefully, if I can get everything together in time, there will be an episode as normal next Friday. But regardless, make sure to always be kind. Please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.